Hari Om. To welcome Swamiji. Swamiji is waiting and he's going to keep you all working your brains. I'm sure you're all jogging your heads, yeah, to keep up pace with Swamiji. And he's going to introduce Indian culture to all of you. Welcome, Swamiji. Hari Om.
Yes, my uh, pranams to all of you. I hope you are having a good time. From yesterday to today, you must have discovered that CVP has a lot more than what we thought, right? Second, uh, we must have also discovered that CVP is not only for children, but it is for the colleges, and most importantly, it is for all of us as well. So Shanti ma'am has revised with you about the technology transformation. One is knowing, second is feeling, and the third is doing, right? Knowing, feeling, and doing. So I will ask you, tomorrow I will ask you, of course you have known something, and in the sessions, some feeling has been created in the sessions. The third question, what are you doing now? What have you decided to change? That you will have to tell us in the session that I'm going to conduct tomorrow. Because only when we transform, transformation can happen to other people also. So the question is, how many of us started exercising after attending physical development class yesterday? How many of us started doing appreciation for other people after attending mental development session? How many of us have started analyzing deeper or thinking more creatively after yesterday's intellectual development session? Today we had spiritual development session just now, and now we are going to do Indian culture. Let me tell you at the outset that Indian culture is a very, very vast topic. One aspect of Indian culture will take a lifetime to study. If you take pranayama, if you take yoga to learn and to practice takes a lifetime. Talk about the spiritual aspect of our culture, it takes thousands of lifetimes to understand and study and gain that knowledge. So all of that we are trying to pack in 50 to 55 minutes. I am not sure how we are going to do it, but let us see what we can do it. I'm going to only explain to all of you the main principles of our culture. Why is it so important? It is extremely important in the current political, geopolitical, state situations that we are facing in Kerala, in our country, and in the world. We are seeing taking over of countries. We are seeing taking over of states. We are seeing taking over of even places and districts in different states. So in this cultural context, what is happening and what are we supposed to do and what is the implication of that? All of these are for us to think and act upon so that we can direct our country in a way that is beneficial to the coming generations. So therefore, this topic is not just an academic topic that we are talking about. Every topic that we're talking about affects life. The health of the society affects the life of the society. The mind and the thoughts of the society affects the life of the society. So every aspect is oriented to creating a wonderful society for which we are responsible. This has to be kept in mind as we are doing and understanding this particular session of Indian culture. So let us start. And to start, I'm using a PowerPoint. So we'll start right at the beginning. Let me first disable annotations for others. Let me enable share sound. Yes, now we are ready to go. Okay. So we are talking about Indian culture. Let's remember that Indian culture is not for 75 years old. The Constitution of India in the first article says India, that is Bharat. Bharat was not born 75 years ago. Bharat is a more than 10,000-year-old civilization. It is not Indus Valley civilization. It should be really called the Saraswati Sindhu civilization, because the settlements that have been discovered, 80% of the settlements are being discovered on the Saraswati basin, which is the Saraswati river, and not on the Indus river or the Sindhu river. 20%, 25% of the settlements are on the Indus river, which is called the Sindhu, the Mohenjo-daro and the Harappa civilizations that we call it, but it is Saraswati Sindhu civilization. Diversity is our culture, and we have 325 spoken languages, 1622 dialects. We've got 23 official languages. We've got a reading population of 142 million people, which is amazing. We've got the largest English speaking population in the world. We've got the world's largest working democracy with a parliamentary system of governance. We've got the great advancement in economy. We've got world-class recognition in IT, biotechnology, etc. And we've got the third largest standing army force. And today, finally, India is knocking its doors on being included in the Security Council of the UN. So like this, India is growing so much and growing so far. So first question is, what is culture? That is the first question. So to call something a culture, we need certain very elementary, basic, important factors. So what are the factors? These things we have to keep in mind. First of all, culture cannot be individualistic. That is not culture. That is an individual practice, that's all. If something has to be a culture, it has to be by a group of people who are living together. Second point, there is a time factor. What I do once or what I started yesterday doesn't become culture. So these practices, these beliefs should have been there for a long period of time. And third, the culture has to be identified in a particular geographical area. For example, Chinmaya College is a geographical area, and therefore what is practiced in the Chinmaya College can be called Chinmaya culture. So therefore, these three factors, geographical area, time, and a group of people living together, needs to be there for a culture to be formed. So these are the physical aspects, the gross aspects, but still what is culture is that group of people living together for a long time have certain fundamental beliefs and they respect those fundamental beliefs. And because they have those fundamental values, beliefs, and what happens is because of that, they respond, they act, they live in a particular way. And the fragrance that comes out of that kind of a living, the grace and glory that emanates from that particular group of people, that is called culture. So the culture means certain fundamental beliefs and the living style of people who have been together for a long period of time. This is called culture. So, in summary, we understand that culture is the collective response and behavior of a society. That is called culture. And which means in different situations, the people respond, the people act, the people behave in a particular way, and that is called culture. So, look at this. In different places in US, when lockdown was announced, people came to protest in the street saying, we want to party. We don't want lockdown. So that was the behavior and the response of the society to the particular issue called pandemic. But in India, there was not even one protest against lockdown. People understood this is important and they did, you see, this is called culture. At the same time, culture may not always be positive because it is the behavior of the society. For example, even today, after so much of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, even today, people have not stopped littering in the streets. Even today, people have not stopped littering in the buses. They have not stopped littering in public places. They have not stopped littering on the trains or the flights. So this is a negative culture that we still have in the society, which has to be removed. So what is culture? Culture is the behavior and the collective response of a society. So how do we determine the culture? Look at the society as to how it is responding. That is the culture of the society. But let us remember that is the culture of the majority of the people in the society. So now the question is, what should be the culture? The culture should be something which benefits everybody. So there is a difference between what culture should be there and what culture is there. So from what culture is there, we have to come to what culture should be there. So too, you can think of what is the culture of your own college. For example, you may say students in my college, they respect teachers well, good culture. At the same time, you may say students in my college come late to college. That is bad culture. So the bad culture has to be removed, and in that place we have to bring in a good culture. So therefore, culture which you understand is not an accident. Anything that is there, that should be our culture. That is not correct. What should be the culture has to be a very, very, very intelligent, very, very clear, and very, very intentional. Let me say this word again. A very, very intentional activity as to what culture has to be established in our colleges, in our country. So, to understand this, we first need to understand what is the need of our culture. First of all, we are Indians, correct? No one is going to accept you as an American or as a Dubai person or a Pakistani or an Afghanistani. Nobody is going to accept you. Wherever you go, you are an Indian. So therefore, this is our identity. So let us be Indians. Second, culture is the vehicle for values. The values have to be passed from one generation to another generation. The culture is the boat, the vehicle that carries to the next generation. Third, it is important for us to recognize, to reclaim, and to relive our culture. The best practices of our culture made our country the best country in the world. I'm sure all the teachers who studied history know that even in 1750s, before the invasions we had so strongly, India's GDP was the greatest in the world. Correct? Around 26-27% of the world's GDP came from India. China's GDP was only 22-23% at that time. When the Britishers left India, India's GDP was a mere 1.5% of the world GDP. Why did every country want to come to India and loot from India if India did not have wealth? So India had such wealth, India had such prosperity, India had such knowledge. That is why people came from different countries to India to learn from India, to trade with India. And the Britishers also came to colonize India only because India was rich. So how did such richness come to India if Indians were not effective, if Indians were not good businessmen, if Indians did not have knowledge? How did India become rich? So the richness of India was because of its culture, and the colonizers destroyed that culture, and we ended up at 1.5% of the world's GDP. So now it is time for us to recognize, to reclaim, and to relive our culture. Because our culture was the best culture that people across the world wanted to live, and even today people want to live. Even today, go to America and ask a girl whom she wants to marry. Go to a university and ask a girl whom she wants to marry, she will say, I would like to marry an Indian. Because Indians have value for marriage. It's a culture. An Indian values marriage. So marriage is not a one night stand or a 1 month stand for an Indian. Marriage is lifelong for an Indian. That's the culture of India. Right? Today across the world, people want to practice yoga, is it not? Every country in the world wants to practice yoga except India. That's a different thing. But the whole point is people want to practice yoga. Right? People want to practice meditation. Meditation is a contribution of India to the world. Fasting is a contribution of India to the world. Upavasa, it is called. Ayurveda is a contribution of India to the world. What even allopathy cannot cure, Ayurveda is curing, is it not? So all these are our contributions, but we don't practice it anymore. So we are disadvantaged because we don't practice it. So therefore, to practice them, we have to learn about our culture. So there are 4 aspects we should remember when we are talking about cultural revival or understanding Indian culture and taking it for its development. I would always request everyone to please take notes and everyone to please pay complete attention so that you are able to take it forward. So there are four components of Indian culture which we need to practice so that our next generation understands our culture. The first one is cultural exposure. Second one is cultural heritage awareness and appreciation. What is heritage? Heritage means the wealth that has been produced in our culture is called cultural heritage. The wealth can be physical wealth, wealth can be the knowledge wealth, wealth can be the value wealth that we have created, the buildings we have created, all of them is cultural heritage. Third, explaining cultural traditions. And the fourth one is called cultural motivation. How do we motivate our students to, and how do we motivate ourselves to discover our culture better and understand our culture? So these are the four aspects that we are going to see in our session. So first point is cultural exposure. So the first question we have to ask ourselves is, where does our culture come from? Right? Our culture is Bharatiya culture, and where does Bharat culture rise from? So the answer is our culture, any culture across the world rises from certain philosophy, a certain understanding, a certain code of principles. So every culture in the world arises from their own philosophy. So Bharat's culture rises from Bharat's philosophy, and Bharat's philosophy is present where it is present in the Vedas. So the Vedas give us, or the Vedas are the root for our culture. So the Vedas were given by our rishis, and the rishis gave us our culture, so it is called rishi culture. So what does the Vedas tell us? What our Vedas tell us, nobody else can dare to tell us. Our Vedas tell us that we are infinite in potential. Can you imagine what the Vedas declare? Vedas declare you are Brahman. Brahman itself is your essence. The Parabrahman is infinite, so you are infinite. That is what the Vedas tell. The Vedas tell you you are divine in essence. That is what the Vedas tell you. Think about it. Which motivational book tells you this, that you are infinite, that you are divine? That is what the Vedas tell you. So our culture tells us that we are divine. So from that philosophy comes what is called religion. Okay? So the philosophy tells you are infinite in your potential, you are divine. But if it only tells you that, if it doesn't tell you how to reach it, then that philosophy is useless to us because we don't know how to reach it. So the way to reach that principle which is declared is called religion. For example, let us say in other contexts, let us say the principle is health gives well-being. Physical health gives well-being. Let us say that is the principle. Okay. So the principle is physical health gives well-being. Let us say I'm giving only an example. But if you only have the principle, physical health gives you well-being, but you don't know how to get physical health, there is no point in that principle because I don't know how to get physical health. So there has to be techniques taught to us by which I can get physical health. So I should have certain techniques of practice of nutrition, of practice of physical exercise by which I can get physical health and therefore I can get well-being. So the practices should be there so that I can reach the principle. So the practices is the religion, the principles are the philosophy. So the practices has to be in accordance with the philosophy. If the philosophy is telling physical health is needed, the practices should not be destroying physical health. It should be creating physical health. Correct or not? So the religion has to be according to the philosophy. Please pay attention to this. So the religion is called Sanatana Dharma. The religion is called Hinduism popularly. It is Hinduism or it is Sanatana Dharma. This is the religion. The philosophy is Veda. So now you see, let me tell you how the religion and the philosophy go together. But before I tell you that, I have to clarify one thing. Some people say, I am very spiritual, Swamiji, but I am not religious. All this is a complete farce. Why? Because you are telling you believe in the principle that health gives well-being, but you don't believe in any of the practices which give health. Then what is the point? If you believe health gives well-being, you should also practice things by which you get health. So those practices are called religion. So to say I am spiritual but I am religious is completely foolish. Right? So let's come to understand how religion and philosophy are going together. Hinduism in particular is the religion which accepts, which appreciates every other religion. This is not true with other religions. Let's be very clear because we are academicians. So how does Hinduism get the ability to appreciate and accommodate other religions? How does it get it? It gets it because it is there in the Vedas, in the philosophy, that ekam sat vipraha bahudha vadanti. This is the declaration of the Vedas. What does it say? It says ekam sat. The truth is one. Ekam sat. Vipraha bahudha vadanti. Vipraha, the people of wisdom. Vipraha bahuda vadanti. They speak of it in bahuda, in many different ways. So the truth is one and it is declared in many different ways by the wise people. So diversity of expressions of the same truth is accepted. So Krishna is one expression of the absolute truth, and he is as valid as Sri Rama, he is as valid as Lord Shiva, is as valid as Ayyappa. Let's understand that. And when we are told everyone is infinite, it is told everyone is infinite, then the religion cannot discriminate in any manner. Because the principle is itself of oneness, of equality. So that is why in religion, especially Hindu religion, please pay attention to it. Devis are also there, Devatas are also there. Which other religion has that? Equality is given in our religious principle itself. We have Ardha, Nari, Ishvara. Equally, Shakti is also there. Equally, Shivan is also there. This is the principle. As much as we have Krishna Janmashtami, as much as we have Ganesha Chaturthi, we have Navaratri, which is worship of divinity in the female form. Correct or not? And this is unique about our religion. We have to be proud of it and we have to practice it also. And why is it possible? It is possible only because the philosophy says the expressions are of different types. So we can accept a Jesus, we can accept an Allah as much as we accept Krishna or Rama. And our history is the proof that we have accepted. So this accommodative principle, which is present only in Hinduism or mostly in Hinduism, this accommodative principle has to be protected against non-accommodative threats. This is important to notice. Non-accommodative principles and non-accommodative policies are a threat to the accommodative culture of India. And therefore, to protect the accommodative nature of India is very important. So now from religion comes customs and traditions. As I told you, it is important to show how customs and traditions are connected to religion, are connected to the same philosophy. So let us say we take the custom of saluting everybody, fantastic custom. We do namaskar to our mothers. We do namaskar to our fathers. We do namaskar to the trees. We do namaskar to the rivers. We do namaskar to the mountains. We do namaskar to the sun, to the sky, to everything we do namaskar. Is it not? That is a custom of India. To do namaskar to only God and nobody else is some other custom. It is not our custom. In our custom, we do namaskar to everybody and everything. Where does this idea come from? This idea comes from the philosophy which says God is in everything. Ishvaraha Sarvavyapi is the concept. Sarvavyapi means what? God is present everywhere. And God is present in everything. This is the philosophy. So I can see God in my mother. So it is said Matra Devo Bhava. Do we understand from there where it comes? In other customs, you don't salute your mother. In Indian Bharatiya custom, we salute our mother. In Bharatiya culture, we salute our nation. We say Vande Mataram. In other cultures, we don't say Vande Mataram. Because it is not part of the philosophy. So be it, it is fine. But my culture tells me, salute the nation. Vande Mataram. Why? Because God is present everywhere. So too, my religion and my custom says, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. As much as you salute your nation, God is not restricted only to India. God is there everywhere. So God is there in the whole world, is it not? So salute everybody, salute everything. Right? So universality is an integral part of our culture. So that is one example I gave you. Let me give you one more example of our tradition. Fine? So we have here one teacher, her name is Andal. Okay, Andal is still a devotee. Let me take another teacher. There is one Krishna Priya teacher here. Krishna Priya is Radha. Okay. So let me take another teacher we have here. Let me see. There is a. Nowadays we don't have teachers so much with that kind of names also. Okay, let me take Ramesh TP. Ramesh sir.
Swamiji?
Yes.
Ramesh is here.
Ramesh sir. So let me ask you one thing. Your name is Ramesh. What is the meaning of Ramesh sir?
I think it's Shiva's name.
Correct. It is Lord Shiva's name, Ramasya Ishaha, the Lord of Rama, which is Shiva. So it is Lord Shiva's name. So let me ask you the question, are you Shiva?
No.
Then how can you have Shiva's name if you're not Lord Shiva?
I think maybe because we all have the divinity in us ourselves. So by giving a name, you tend to remember that name. You call the name and then you remember the name. Like people give a name like Ram, Krishna. So you call them and then it itself becomes a chanting kind of a.
Fantastic answer. That is the absolute perfect answer anybody has given me in any of the sessions. So congratulations, sir. Perfect answer.
Thank you.
Right? Someone is named by Devi's name. Rajeshwari, somebody is named. Why? Because they are potentially Rajeshwari. Someone is named Rama because they are potentially Rama. So the idea is don't behave like Ravana. Discover your Rama nature, discover your divinity, and that is why we have or we are permitted in our customs to name ourselves by God's names. In most of the other traditions, you cannot have God's names because you are not God or you are not potentially God according to those philosophies. Let it be so, doesn't matter, we have no problem. But to remind our nobility and our divinity, we are given God's names. And in the name of modernity, we are only destroying our own culture. What is your child's name? Oh, Swamiji, my child's name is Ding Dong. What? Ding Dong, Swamiji. Why did you name your child Ding Dong? When the child was born, Swamiji, somebody rang a bell. So it matched, no. So we called her Ding Dong. Very good. You see how we are not aware of our culture, why we are named putting such names to our children and we call them by some other name. And some people are so ignorant. One child has been given the name Agnya. Agnya, not Agnya, Agnya. That's the name of the child. I asked them, why did you name your child Agnya? Swamiji, it sounds nice, no. But you know what is the meaning of Agnya? Agnya means ignorance. Nya means knowledge. Agnya means ignorance. So they name their child, my dear ignorance, and they call the child by ignorance. You see how we are being so, what do we call that, ignorant about our culture. So from the culture, from the customs and traditions, we have what is called culture. So the culture is the reflection of the philosophy, the religion, the customs and traditions, all of them put together is called culture. So it is not an accident. It is a very, very well thought of intentional creation that is called culture. So let us see further the greatness of a culture. First of all, it is the oldest living civilization. People have tried to destroy it so much and so much and so much, yet it is living even today. Excavations in Mohenjo-daro, excavations in Harappa, excavations in Saraswati civilization sites have shown Namaste being practiced for more than 5,000 years. It is practiced. We are a continuous culture. Yoga is practiced for 5,000 years. Shiva is worshipped even in those times. He is called Pashupati. He is worshipped. There are seals, there are symbols which are present. Today we are practicing that. Culture, we are a living civilization. Mesopotamian gone, Greek gone, Aztecs gone, everything gone, but Indian culture still remains. Second point is it is well created, it is well thought of. As I said, it is an intentional knowledge based creation. In our culture, we have personification of creation. This is very, very unique. What is personification of creation? Everything in creation is considered like a person or as divine. Everything in this culture. So the rivers are not rivers, they are mothers, they are devis in our culture, is it not? So it is Ganga Mata, it is Yamuna, it is Saraswati, it is Godavari, each one is a mother. Prakriti itself is what? Prakriti itself is mother. We don't abuse our mother. So too, when we see Prakriti as our mother, we will stop abusing Prakriti. Think about it. When we stopped looking at nature as mother, when we stopped worshipping nature, we started abusing nature. So the loss of our culture leads to creation of abuse. So in our culture, we are taught we are not the gods of creation, we are the servants of nature. That's what is taught to us. So we are taught to serve nature as our duty. One of the examples. Second, we are taught in our culture, it is our practice to see woman as divine. Is it not? To see men also as divine is our culture. So in our culture, even today to some extent, we don't call somebody older than us or even younger than us, we don't call them by name. We call them Cheta, brother. Is it not? We call them Chechi. To call them by name is disrespect. We call somebody who's younger as daughter Endamolu, or we call them as Endama. Correct or not? Now think of the relationship that is created in our mind when we call somebody Chechi, when we call somebody Amma, or when we call somebody Molu. We create positive relationships by how we address them. Call her Sheila, call her Sheila Chechi. Complete attitude changes. And this was part of our culture, which is also present in our national pledge. It says, all Indians are my brothers and sisters. It says it. But because we have stopped following it, we have woman abuse, woman victimization. Correct or not? If I consider somebody my sister, will I inflict violence on my sister? I will not. Because I have forgotten that she is my sister, she is like my mother, she is like my younger sister, she is like my daughter, we start inflicting violence on them. So it is the loss of culture that we have inflicted violence. Let us revive calling each other by positive relationships. We don't even call them friend because friend also has no proper definition. But Chechi or Cheta has proper definition. This is our culture. Next, we have pursuit of knowledge as our greatest. Going to the next level, we are taught the pursuit of life of Purushartha, and the greatest of that is moksha. In our culture, we are taught guru, right? Let all of us be thankful that we are teachers in India. Okay? Abroad, no one will stand up when you enter class. Probably they'll have a pizza and they will have also a Coke with them in the class when you enter class. You teach. And nobody will address you ma'am or sir. You'll be called Rajesh. Can you please explain this to me? That's what you'll be called. So the Guru Sthana is given by our culture because we respect knowledge. It is natural for us to have universal outlook because we have the mantra Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Please remember, someone coming from outside India does not have to become an Indian so that we can live together. The Jewish community came to India because they were threatened in their own land. We did not ask the Jewish to become Hindus. We said, continue, live happily. That's called accommodation, right? When the Parsis came to India, we didn't tell them become Hindus. Only then you can live here. We said continue, practice your religion. And the Gujarat king gave them 50 acres, how many? 500 acres of land, and he even built them a Parsi temple for them, saying, yes, it is important for you to practice your religion, please practice. Kerala has the second oldest church or mosque, whatever in the whole world Kerala has. So how come this is possible if we did not accommodate? These are all unique things about our culture, and these unique things have to be preserved and have to be protected from threat. So this is about cultural, first of all, this is about cultural exposure. Now we come to the second aspect, which is cultural heritage awareness and appreciation. We should know our history properly. Okay? Today, our history is completely hijacked or manipulated. So we have to teach our children the correct history. Who's this? This is Tipu Sultan, as projected by certain people. His drawing is present in a British museum almost 20 years after his death. Someone drew his picture. How does he look? This is how he looks. But to make him popular and acceptable, this is how he is portrayed. Why should he be portrayed like this way? And what is Tipu Sultan's real history? He was not one who fought the British, of course not. He came to Kerala, he stayed there for 8 years, looted and plundered Kerala, and because of his attack in Guruvayur, the statue had to be taken away from Guruvayur temple itself and protected in another place for many years. And in Guruvayur itself, he killed and celebrated the killing of thousands of men. He cut off the noses and the ears of Kerala people. He cut off the breasts of the women there, raped and killed them. He did that. This is the true history of Tipu Sultan. And for that matter, he is not even an Indian. And because we are being taught this distorted history, we want to celebrate his festival. This is a place called Bhaktiyarpur. What is this place? This place is, in other words, called Nalanda. And who is this Bhaktiyarpur? It is Bhaktiyar Khilji who burned down the Nalanda University. He destroyed the Nalanda University, which was a world university for people to come and learn and go. And the library was so big that it is said the library burned for 6 months. It burned. 6 months it burned. And we celebrate and we recognize this man who destroyed us by naming a station, railway station after him. What did Aurangzeb do to you? What goodness did he do to you? So we celebrate somebody who destroyed us. At the same time, we don't study about Martandavarman, we don't study about Rajaraja Cholan. Thanks to Martandavarman, if he was not there, we would have been a Dutch colony before a colony of East India Company. Please go to Trivandrum. Even today in the beach, we have the Kolachal. And there we have the memorial of Martandavarman, a local king defeating the biggest naval power in the world at that time, which was the Dutch East India Company. He made the Dutch people surrender and never come back and rule over India after that. Of course, they had very, very small colonies. That's all they had. So Martandavarman, a local king, was powerful enough to defeat a world power. Rajaraja Cholan had a fleet, a naval fleet of 1,000 ships. I'm talking only naval fleet, of 1,000 ships. What powerful people we were. Chandragupta Maurya defeated every territory which was taken by Alexander. Alexander came and he captured certain territories of India. Chandragupta Maurya, who was born among cowherds, became a king and he took off everything which Alexander took from India. But these stories we are not talked about. This is part of true Indian culture. Second, we should remember the greatness of our literature, and Sanskrit is the most amazing literature that we have. Tamil is a fantastic literature we have. Like that, in all regional language we have fantastic literature. How many of our children, how many of us know certain poem of Kumaranasha? ജഗതീചരാത്രിയും ജചാംഗതാരകങ്ങളും അല്ലെ പകലുമക്ക ബിംബവും നിറഞ്ഞ മേഘ ജാലവും മൃഗകദംബ പക്ഷി വൃക്ഷ പുഷ്പശലഭ വൃന്ദവും മികവിൽ നിന്റെ വൈഭവങ്ങൾ വാഴ്ത്തിടുന്ന ദൈവമേ ഗഗനമെന്തൊരു അത്ഭുതം സമുദ്രമെന്തൊരു അത്ഭുതം നിഖില ജീവ ജാലജീവം എന്തൊരു അത്ഭുതം. Amazing poems by Kumaranashan, but how many of our children know it? This is the heritage that our children should know, is it not? Or should our children know those dirty movie songs which come in Malayalam? How many of our children know Vallathol? How many of our children know Evulthachan? How many of our children know the amazing Kilipad Ramayanam? Shouldn't our children know and appreciate this, which is the great culture of our country? Sciences, right? Ayurveda is a science. It is not just a tradition of some primitive kind of what do we call that, tribal treatment. No, Ayurveda is advanced treatment. And let me tell you, if you read the Mahabharata, in the second sarga, the first discussion that comes out is what is the root of disease. There is a discussion between Yudhishthira and one more person. What is the root of disease? And he says the root of physical disease is in the mind. I am talking about Mahabharata, which was written thousands of years back. They are saying the root of disease is in the mind. So the doctor should treat the mind of the patient along with the body of the patient. What advancement in thought, which was present in India so many thousands of years back. Look at Chanakya. Chanakya was one who created a king out of a coward boy, and that boy defeated Alexander. And we are not learning his political science that he created. Correct? We are learning Peter Drucker. Our Chanakya created so much that we don't know. Same way, we have what is called our epics. Epics means Ramayana and Mahabharata, and Ramayana and Mahabharata is not mythology. Ramayana and Mahabharata are history. Of course, history written in poetic form, in poetic language, that may be there. But it is not fiction. It is not mythology. It is epic. Epic means accounts, historical accounts of legends. So that we have to study. We have to study our arts and hobbies. These are our heritage. So our knowledge system we have the Vedas, we have the Upavedas, we have the Upangas, and so many things we have. My time is up, but the whole point is we have so much that we have to study. We have what is called the Kailasa temple, right? Even today in the world, nobody can understand how this temple was created. 240 feet of single rock was cut from the top so that the temple can be created. Please look up the YouTube video on Kailasa temple. We have 64 arts, 64 kalas, what is called, and that we have to understand. The colonial powers did not want to give us any credit, and the first inventor of aeroplane, unmanned aeroplane, was an Indian, and it is recorded in the British newspapers. His name was Shivakumar. His name was Shiv Talpade, a Maharashtrian, and he did this in the Mumbai beach. But even today we are saying Wright brothers created aeroplane.
Technology.
Right? All this you see. Same way, each tradition, like wearing chandan, like wearing kumkum, that also is put down, and this itself is a 5,000-year-old history. These are, what do we call that? Harappan. And you see here, the kumkum which you wear on the forehead, on top, that practice was there 5,000 years back. Okay? So the whole point is we are an amazing tradition, and we have to explain to our children the cultural awareness about our culture that has to be taught. We have to teach our children our cultural traditions, like the Varna system, the woman's role in Indian tradition, astronomical philosophy, all these things we have to teach. Very, very consistently what happened was, because of the colonial rule that we had, the powers had to destroy those who are ruled. They have to destroy. Only then they can rule us. So I'm finishing with this one. Okay? So we had this James Millman. He wrote the history of India. He wrote the history of India. And you know, he wrote the history of India even without coming to India once. This man has never stepped into India, but he wrote the history of India, which became the basis of Indian history worldwide. Imagine what he would have written. Max Muller, he translated the Vedas and the scriptures of India. His idea he writes in his letters. It is available in the internet. His objective was to convert Hindus into Christians. With that objective, he translated the Vedas. So you can imagine what would have happened because of this. And of course, third was Macaulay, whose system of education, unfortunately, we are following even today. He replaced the Gurukula system that we had. He replaced that into English education system. His objective was very clear, that we will be Indians in our looks, that cannot be changed, but in dress and in thinking and in speaking, we will be like the Englishmen. And today let us understand that this particular session is not happening in Sanskrit, it is not happening in Malayalam, it is happening in English. Okay? So it is important for us to revive all of this and bring it back into our system. So whatever topics you're teaching, whatever class you're taking, please find out what is the parallel from our culture, right? Recently, I have brought out 21 posters on the greatness of India. On the greatness of Sanskrit, I brought out 21 posters. Some people may be getting it, I don't know. So let us talk about the greatness of our languages. Let us talk about the greatness of our culture and teach that to our students. So first thing is we have to discover, that is the most important, because most of it we ourselves do not know. And most importantly, it is to expose our students to our culture and our greatness. So along with management, please teach Chanakya. Bring in references from Chanakya. When you're teaching English, please bring Vallathol. Please bring Ashan. Please bring Kalidasa along with your English poems. Only in that way we can bring back our culture, we can bring back our greatness, and let us not be hijacked by wrong criticisms and wrong ideas. Already things have been taken away, things are being taken away. For example, yoga is becoming beer yoga. People are drinking beer and they're practicing yoga and they're saying that is yoga. Pranam is being called super brain yoga, a Japanese creation. Pranayama that we have taught the world, pranayama is becoming cardio synchronous breathing, a creation by USA it seems. Upavasa is becoming intermittent fasting. Hello, we were practicing it for thousands of years. We are still practicing it. So what is happening? Anything great about our culture is being unculturalized, is being taken away from our culture and told to us that it is not part of Indian culture. It is our creation. So whatever is amazing about our culture is not our culture. And whatever has been forgotten and practiced wrongly, that is a mistake of Indian culture. This is the attack that is happening on Indian culture. Let us be aware, let us be conscious, and let us teach our children properly. Thank you very much. I can go on and on and on and on and on and on. And I can't stop because this is a very passionate topic, but I'll have to stop now. We'll keep our discovery going. Hari Om. Thank you very much.